Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the mornings. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Time to get things started once again. And the dominant story, I think, obviously, for pretty much everybody, the story of the air collision happened in the D.C. area last night. You have no doubt by now heard about it. A passenger airline, a regional jet, flying from Wichita, Kansas, into National Airport in Washington, D.C., struck by a military helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter that just apparently flew right into it in full view of everyone and about 10,000 webcams and dashboard cams. There's video coming from all over the place, and you've likely seen some of it. And what can I tell you? It's a crazy day. I don't think we've ever started off under the shadow of an air disaster. And I think that's the news has been telling me it's been like the safest stretch for air travel since forever. It's like 15 years since there was a major commercial airliner disaster of this sort. And that's great news. I mean, we've done wonders in this country and elsewhere improving aviation safety, thanks to, red tape and regulation, all the things that everybody hates. So I guess there's some room to talk about that. And, of course, we don't have the normal kind of person as president. Ordinarily, as it turns out, we have a normal-ish kind of person for vice president, despite the fact that he's completely weird and abnormal and has no person-to-person instincts. I guess he's a good writer, apparently. He wrote a book and everything. And, he had the presence of mind to say, well, the statement I want out on social media following this crash from the vice president's office or from my Twitter account is, prayers to all the families involved, the regular stuff, the thing you want normal people to say in that moment. Trump is doing, I suppose if you really want to make an argument in his favor for anything, you'd say it's very relatable. He's doing what every American does, not what the president's supposed to be doing, but watching it on TV and posting on social media. Oh boy, that looks terrible. I can't believe it. What a bad thing. He says, not good. That was terrific. What a reaction. He had a thing. Somebody captured it off of Truth Social. And, it's the kind of reaction that you might be having if you were sitting on the couch watching the news and speaking to one another. But if you're going to go out there as president of the United States to say, why didn't the helicopter fly left or right or go up or down? What's wrong? Not good. But it does highlight some weird things. For instance, like we said, it's a military helicopter. That's not unusual in the Washington, D.C. area, around the airports in particular. It's not like the place is covered in military aircraft all the time. But there is a military base directly across the Potomac River from the airport, and it's an active one. And what can I tell you? Apparently, lots of people who fly in and out of National Airport frequently say they very often see helicopters flying lower or higher parallel with planes that are landing on their making their approach. Nobody notices them during takeoff. The angle of takeoff is too steep to notice such things. But anyway, they're there all the time. They're not supposed to fly into the airplanes, of course. That's not, and so it was worst time of day. It's pitch black. It's been cold weather. It was not a bad day yesterday. It was actually pretty warm, but the water is cold. But apparently the water had nothing to do with it. They collided and exploded, and no one knows why. And we'll be watching for the investigation to figure out why. Because it was a military helicopter, ordinarily you might expect to see, say, the Secretary of Defense put out some sort of a statement. But our Secretary of Defense hasn't been seen, let's say, in public. I don't even know if he's been seen in public since his confirmation a couple days before. And with a guy like that, you got to start speculating. It would be irresponsible not to speculate that he's too drunk to be seen in public or something like that. Now, he's quitting next week. You see, it's celebration week this week. Next week starts the, I'm totally not going to drink while I'm Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Transportation, even newer more newly minted than the Secretary of Defense, was in fact seen in public, showed up for the nominal press conference that they held on it at the airport yesterday. They had to delay things several hours to get everybody together, but there wasn't very much news to report. And indeed, in the morning, the news is everybody is feared lost, and pretty much, what we expected to hear after watching the rescue efforts yesterday and seeing what the temperatures were like and watching the video. It seemed more and more unlikely that there would be any survivors, but there they were having a press conference. Sean Duffy made it to the press conference, and one of the Kansas senators, the origin of the flight, made it to the press conference. I gather he was probably down in. We kept waiting for this press conference to happen. They kept delaying it. I think he was probably down in Mar-a-Lago or down in Florida, where they were having the Republican retreat over the past couple of days. He made it up in time. They delayed things, I think, probably to wait for him to be there. Entirely reasonable and proper. There wasn't much news to report. But Trump, I guess, just decided to do this from the couch, and Hegseth from nowhere. And and then the commander-in-chief wondering why the helicopter didn't go up or down or left or right. Why didn't he command it to go up or down or left or right? I'm surprised that, had it been on somebody else's shoulders, Trump would almost certainly have been leveling that charge. And, of course, people are noticing that there have been freezes on FAA hiring, and that all of the air traffic controllers got that fork in the road email and asked them if they were interested in quitting yesterday. And probably not a great time to be discussing cuts in the personnel there. And while that has almost nothing to do with what actually happened last night, had the shoe been on the other foot, had there been a Democratic president, had Kamala Harris been the president, had a black woman been president and frozen the FAA and talked about cuts there, and then there was an air crash, you'd never be hearing the end of it on Fox News. That's just true. All right. Well, plenty of other things happening, but there's plenty to talk about on here that I think is totally in bounds. And, of course, everybody just has this on their minds, including Greg Dworkin, who is here this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. So I came across something.
All right. That sounds good.
Twitter. Why do you use Twitter? They're Nazis. Because people post there that don't post anywhere else, and you find stuff that you don't find anywhere else. That's why.
Yes. And they're Nazis.
Well, not everybody posts as a Nazi there.
That's true.
There are people who say,
look,
I'm staying here just because I don't want to cede the entire place to the Nazis. You don't get to win. So, lots of different points of view. That's what makes America great. That's what makes for horse races, as they say. But this particular post is from an account called OSINT Technical. That is to say, Open Source Intelligence Technical.
Not a Nazi.
Not a Nazi. And he writes for many, and a lot of the Ukraine and overseas Syria stuff comes from accounts like this, which is why I follow it.
Okay.
And this one says, for many in the D.C. area flying community, the crash tonight wasn't a matter of if, but when. D.C. airspace is some of the most congested in the world, with helicopters and jets forced into a small operating area. Doesn't exactly help that the Army uses it as a training ground. And there's your clue as to why Hegseth has nothing to say at the moment, because he can't figure out what he's supposed to say.
Yeah, well, what are you going to say, really?
I've been a D.C. area plane spotter, says this account, for over 10 years, and the Army regularly uses I-495 and the Potomac River as training areas. And then he's got pictures of helicopters to prove the point.
Yes.
Pilots in the Reddit flying community, that is to say r/flying,
okay.
There's a community.
They are flying.
Online community.
Yes.
Are saying similar things. One regional jet pilot said this would be the very first place I would expect this to happen. The Potomac VFR is insanely busy with Army helicopters, Park Police, and other associated agency helicopters, and D.C. police helicopters. Seen here in this picture, a U.S. Army UH-60 flying at low altitude up the Washington Channel just adjacent to DCA.
Yes. Well, if they fly a parallel route, that's one thing. It's
onboard footage of what an Army training flight over D.C. looks like, where you can basically just, see other aircraft really easily. Point of view of DCA from the Army UH-60 on the above flight roughly in the same location. The Black Hawk is roughly 2,500 feet from runway 33.
Yeah, that's the runway they were using yesterday for southern approaches.
Right, and in hindsight, here's an incredibly damning video, a completely different time, of a runway 19 takeoff from DCA. That's DCA's Reagan National.
Yes.
Over a
straight
flight
up the
of
pipe.
Army Blackhawks. So
yeah,
it's taken from the plane.
They're there
the plane
all the
is
time.
flying over 3 or 4 Army Blackhawk helicopters.
Yes, and I gather that
this happens all the time.
That's just where the helicopters are. That's where they like the base on the other side of the river there, which I forget. I'm waiting for Trump. What the hell is there even military helicopters doing there? That's where they keep his helicopter. That's where Marine One is based.
Here's the next one, which I think is the most damning and the final in the list. The Senate actually bumped up the number of flight slots at DCA last year, increasing airport traffic. Only 4 senators voted no. All 4 were from Virginia and Maryland.
Yes, they know how crowded it is.
Yes, and the 4 argued it went against safety concerns after a recent near miss.
I don't think I even registered the recent near miss.
I'll send you that story.
But
so
you're right.
The 4 senators from Maryland and Virginia loudly opposed the inclusion of 5 new slots or 10 round-trip flights, arguing it went against safety concerns after a near miss there last month and that it would significantly increase delays at the landlocked airport.
What?
Reagan National is just a weird airport. I mean,
it's very
everybody
old.
loves to fly there because it's only 8 minutes to downtown D.C. or some ridiculous amount of time.
I hate it.
I'm only exaggerating.
I'm 8 minutes to Dulles. So
what's that?
I'm 8 minutes to Dulles, so I hate that airport.
Right. If you're going to D.C. from elsewhere,
and that's
Dulles
the issue.
is like an hour away.
Yes, and that's where the vote that you mentioned with the Maryland and Virginia senators who, actually deal with people who fly in and out of there all the time, and the number of flights that go over the houses of constituents at all hours.
Right.
They didn't want any more flights.
Versus the fly there.
Yes.
Put more flights.
Right. 96 other senators say, when I fly in,
not my problem.
I want to land here. And so they literally, the fight was over every senator or member of the House saying, well, I would like to add a direct flight from wherever I come from to D.C.
For everybody else, I'm in power. That's what I do. Right.
I mean, you want that in a D.C. airport, but this thing was built in the 30s. There's no room for that kind of jet travel there.
Right. And what are you going to do, build another airport?
I did. It's here. Next to me at Dulles.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And you can go by metro now, but that's not what members of Congress do.
Yeah. So. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting because it's not like, this was just an accident. No, it was an accident waiting to happen. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there's so much military traffic there is a part of what's going on. The fact that there's so much traffic at National Airport is a big part of it as well. Mm-hmm. And so, there you have it.
Yes. I'll agree with one part of what Donald Trump had to say about it. Not good. It is Joint Base Anacostia Bowling on the other side of the river, by the way, in case you were interested in looking it up. And you can see the nice pictures of the Army helicopters there, plus the Marine One base that is there.
Anyway, so that's all going on. There's, as you said, a lot of other stuff going on as well. One of the things I wanted to start with is the hostage exchanges going on in Israel, which is a continuing coverage. First of all, Yossi Fuchs, who Yossi is a cabinet secretary for Netanyahu. I don't know which one. But he does say,
everything.
I was there in all the forums that discussed this deal, which is the same deal as May 27th. That's the key line there. Was rejected by Hamas for 6 months and has not yet been approved by it during this entire period. If a positive response had come from Hamas, it would have been a majority in the cabinet and government. From the news report, the prime minister did not move from his position a millimeter. This is all on Hamas, yada, yada, yada. It's all their fault. And Noga Tarnopolsky, the Israeli reporter, said, wait a minute, how is it possible that Netanyahu cabinet secretary admitted that this deal is the same one that was on the table on May 27th and still be in power.
I guess maybe they think like Trump. You can just, I don't know, say anything.
You can just say anything and it doesn't have any repercussion. And it doesn't matter. But it does matter. Now that the Israelis are related that some hostages are being released, including the ones who are no longer alive, they're not related about that, but they want their remains and the families want closure.
Sure.
But this latest hostage handover was a little unlike the others.
Oh.
Firstly, it wasn't Hamas. It was Islamic Jihad who was holding the hostages, a related group that sort of answers to Hamas under pressure but isn't Hamas.
I see. The lift to Hamas's Uber.
So they got 3 Israeli hostages released and 5 Thailand hostages.
Oh, yes,
released.
The farm workers.
Yes, they were farm workers. Why are there Thai hostages? Because California's too far.
Yeah, they were working on the farms.
They come from a very
Israel.
poor area of Thailand. So poor, in fact, that they said in the news reports in Haaretz and the New York Times that they can't afford to fly to Bangkok from where they live to meet the hostages and fly back. It's just too expensive for them.
Well, maybe we get it.
So it's a very poor area. They come to Israel to pick crops. How can there be crops in a desert area? There's oranges in Jaffa. There's figs. There's dates. There's work.
There's water. They make it work.
Water.
That's a whole other thing in Israel. Making the desert bloom was the whole
exactly
point.
Right.
They love that slogan.
So I'm just saying, there's work there.
It's right. And helicopters.
Right. And I mean, it's not like the religious faction in Israel, I mean, who are too busy studying to go into the army. They're too busy to pick crops. So you got to import.
That's right. Yeah, they're praying for crops, and then they show up in a
they're
tie.
praying for somebody to pick the crops for them.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense. So
it works.
In any case, that's why they were there. They were released, and they'll be sent back to Thailand. However, the release and the previous 2 releases by Hamas were sort of semi-staged. The first one was a bit chaotic, which everybody said, okay, well, it's the first one.
Yeah, and it's
the second one was totally staged with an army-like military presence by Hamas, which upset some people in Israel. This one was completely chaotic, and essentially the hostages had to run through a gauntlet of screaming and yelling people. And that got everybody upset. It was so upset that the German ambassador, Stefan Siebert, the German ambassador to Israel said, watching appalling scenes of 2 hostages, Gadi Moses and Arbel Yehud, an old man and a young woman, forced to make their way through a threatening and armed crowd. What a despicable way of letting them go after 482 days. Stay strong. So after that happened, Netanyahu, at least temporarily, put on hold release of the Palestinian hostages that were supposed to happen in return. As if that wouldn't cause any problems.
It clearly will, but I mean, for another person in a similar situation, I guess, had he not been conducting this war this way, you might expect that as an almost normal reaction. And
that's exactly right. And I don't blame Netanyahu for this one. I blame him for literally everything else, but not this one.
Yeah. Well,
point being that even the Germans, everybody sees this as this was a screw up on the side of Hamas, and that even though the right wing in Israel are looking for any excuse to delay further hostage reparations and exchanges,
yes, all right,
that's not this. This is probably just what it says: a temporary. Everybody would have done this kind of thing because you got to get your act together and exchange them better.
Yeah, I mean, you can't exchange hostages throwing them out of the trunk of a car or something.
Right, on the side of the road while the car is still moving. You can't do that. So that's what's going on there. And it's obviously
there are norms.
News because everything has the potential to screw it up. Everything is just so delicate.
That's true. Right.
That everything has the potential to screw it up.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So you want to, if you're going to go through the trouble of staging some of them, stage them all. And if it's too expensive to stage
Yeah,
it
we'll
with
be
an
mad,
armed
but at least the
presence,
hostages will be safe as they get
Yeah.
released, and we'll live with that, and we'll yell at you, but it's okay.
yeah. I mean, you don't
this is
have to
different.
have a...
This is actually putting them at threat, and so that's just unacceptable.
Yes. All right. Well, everybody, yeah, okay. I think everyone understands that one. It's more weirdness, and what can you do?
Right.
People are at war.
So if you want to read about it, there's a piece in the New York Times which is actually very good. Israel suspends prisoner
New York
release
Times is
after
not very
chaotic
good.
hostage handover. So that's all right. Getting back to some domestic things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was the RFK hearings yesterday and a bit more today.
Yes.
And we have Kash Patel and we have Tulsi Gabbard.
Right. Everybody
lined
coming up.
for hearings as well.
Yeah, there's been a couple of confirmations of people we don't care very much about.
Right, one way or the other. I mean, Lee Zeldin, the environmental
that's true.
czar, is pretty funny, but
We didn't love that.
whatever.
I
Funny
would-
if you
yeah.
have a sick sense of humor.
Sure.
Just like he knows nothing about it.
Vote no on everybody. There you go.
Right. But probably Tom Tillis thought about this nomination and said, I realize he's completely and totally unqualified, but he said he was, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I got a book. So, all right, yeah. I subscribe to Better Homes and Gardens. Is that
Right,
cool?
Exactly.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
I wanted
RFK
to,
was a disaster.
Again, in terms of touching on domestic, I want to start with something we were talking about just the other day.
They call it domestic.
The Trump White House wants a court challenge over frozen funds, says the Huffington Post. An internal OMB, Office of Management and Budget document,
Allegedly.
shows that it is official administration policy to block funding to provoke a constitutional challenge. The administration's
wonderful.
federal government funding freeze instituted Monday and apparently rescinded Wednesday, which, by the way, was an absolute disaster for them. And even the press was ready to say, this is a terrible, horrible. I can't believe I was so impressed with how they were doing, and this is awful. A real big screw up. And
Yeah, I mean, we'll take it.
I'll take it. But if that means
Breaks our way,
over,
sure.
great.
Yeah.
Not even 100 days. But appears to be part of the White House's official policy to get courts to hand President Donald Trump the power to pick and choose which congressionally authorized funding he will spend, according to a confidential document obtained by Huffington Post. HuffPost, they're called now.
All right, I'll have to take a look.
You have to. The confidential Office of Management and
Huff
Budget
to it.
document
Yes.
outlining regulatory misalignment calls on Trump to issue executive orders blocking the release of appropriated funds in order to provoke a court challenge over the president's power to impound such funds.
Yes.
And you may remember,
do.
as recently as yesterday, we were talking about Matt Glassman's
Yes.
harangue about impoundment and how this would really significantly change the balance of power if that were to go through. That is a threat. And again, the Supreme
Yes.
Court is just so unstable. You don't know what they're going to do. And so it's entirely possible that they'll say, yeah, sure, the president is imperial and he can do whatever he wants. And
I
screw you.
mean, anything is possible given...
Now, most legal scholars
this-
expect that not to happen, and most legal
Yeah.
scholars expected the Supreme Court not to take the
yes.
Trump immunity case.
That is true. In this case, the strength of their argument is that John Roberts, when he worked at the White House in his, I guess, end of Reagan, early George H.W. Bush, I think, so like 80s, wrote the OLC memo on this. Somebody asked, what's our impoundment power on something like XYZ? And he said, none, zero. I would advise stay very, 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 very far away from it. Now,
Yes, but if John Roberts votes with the uncorrupt
Right.
Supreme Court members, that just means that
That's one.
we lose 5-4.
right. So we have to hope that Amy Coney Barrett is like, I paid a lot for my books. I want them to still be current. I need this
Right.
to remain the law.
Right. So it's worrisome, but
Yeah.
not a done deal that the court will take the case, and if they take it, that they will rule the way that Trump expects them to because he appointed them.
Yes, right. Or he says,
But
I'll
it
throw
is
you out
of
the-
interest that this is
off
in
the
fact
court.
the game plan.
Yep, that's true. And not a particularly good one. I think the thread you read yesterday from Glassman, maybe, might have been him, might have been somebody else, pointing out this is a suit that has to be filed by someone else saying you can't do this, which means that they don't have the ability to file this in Amarillo, Texas. necessarily.
I said that.
You did.
Yeah, there's none of those guys. It was me.
Well, there you go. You're very smart.
It was me.
Good
You
idea.
say, oh, look, you can't jump shop on this one. Ha, ha, ha.
Right. Well, that's true.
I'm just a civilian, but I know that.
Yeah, and most of this stuff will be filed in the D.C. circuit, where they handle these cases all the time. And
that's not good for him.
Right. He loses there an awful lot, like he did last time.
But again, it gets to the Supreme, and then we'll see.
Yep. And quickly.
I mean, they're already giving. The judge says, "I have a restraining order on you doing these things."
Right.
But that's only temporary. So
yes,
the article says Trump is targeting the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, a law that greatly restricts the ability of the president to drive his car after he doesn't pay his parking tickets. No, it's not that kind of impoundment. It's a different kind of impoundment.
Yes.
It's not a scofflaw. He's basically saying that even though the funds were appropriated and it's law that they have to be spent, I don't have to because I don't feel like it.
Yeah. That's what he's saying.
And I want to be able to pick and choose which ones. There's no line item veto for the president, except I decided that, there is.
Right. One of the things, we covered, I think probably on Tuesday, just the history of that the Impoundment Control Act was, written in reaction to Nixon trying to do this. And the line item veto was invented as an attempt to work around the court saying, you can't do this.
Well, there's another piece of history that's also very related to this. Trump violated this act when the Government Accountability Office said he did, when he withheld funds for Ukraine, and that's why he got impeached.
Yes. I am astonished that everybody is on Monday, I was just like, wow, everybody's just waking up to this impoundment problem. We impeached him in front of everybody for this. Does everybody not remember this?
Did you? No, you forgot he was impeached twice?
I did not, but they all said
first one
we
was
impeached him for Hunter Biden, I thought. What?
The second one was for January 6th.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So much happening. We're invading our own states. We were talking about that during the break. Trump says he invaded California the other day to turn on the big water tap. Justice tells me he's also saying they invaded Oregon. So just if you're counting, trying to get to 50, we got a ways to go. But it's only day, 10 of the presidency here. And he's already invaded 2 states. Oh, and now the video. I have a scrolling video thing going, unfortunately. I want to get rid of this thing. But RFK was on there, too. And I don't know if I ever heard his voice until yesterday.
Oh, his voice is terrible.
Oh, my God.
It's worse I'm
than surprised that senators didn't ask him, are you okay? Like, I know this is not a joke here, but you are supposed to be the health secretary. And are you all right? You sound like you might be... I was going to say sick, but I actually think dying.
Not healthy.
Yeah, I mean, well, he isn't. as many people pointed out,
probably has vocal cord nodules, but why he doesn't do anything about it, I don't know.
Because he's going to have a homeopathic cure.
In any case, RFK had a hearing.
He did.
And for normal people, it didn't go well.
That's right.
Thought it was great. Analysis and confirmation hearing. This is from Stat News. RFK Jr. diagnoses a nation's health ills but fails to prescribe remedies.
That's correct.
The HHS nominee also distanced himself from prior statements on vaccines and more. I mean, the Democrats are pounding him. They did their job.
Yeah.
You say you're for vaccines, and yet you wrote this book that said you're not. Well,
you're not.
I am. I was.
No, you
I
aren't.
never said that. Well, here is the transcript where it says you did say that. That was Ralph Warnock.
Okay.
Yes, but that was then, and this is now, and I'm pro-vaccine, and I've always been pro-vaccine. What about the fact that there's this organization, this group that sells anti-vaccine onesies to babies, Bernie Sanders said, and you're on the board.
Don't even know.
I have nothing to do with them. I don't control those products.
Right.
It's called Children's Health Defense.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary Holland, the CEO of Children's Health Defense, was in the room.
Wow.
And greeted his
It's her fault.
During a break. I don't know her. I had nothing to do with it.
She gets coffee for me.
Perhaps the hearing's most memorable exchange, Senator Bernie Sanders
like Christopher Lloyd
displayed a poster board with images of Children's Health Defense merchandise, 2 baby onesies emblazoned with the slogans, "Unvaxxed, unafraid," and "No vax, no problem." Sanders then asked Kennedy if he would pull the products, and "Are you supportive of the onesies?" And Sanders repeated several times in the exchange, and RFK Jr. responded that he had no power over CHD, and he's supportive of vaccines, even though, I'm associated with this thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the big stuff was Cassidy, Bill Cassidy.
Oh, yeah, okay. Not Cassidy
doctor.
Hutchinson, the
asked him,
senator.
A ton of questions about how Medicaid works, and it was pretty clear he had no clue whatsoever. Oh. And so naturally he'll be
maybe, I don't know, Cassidy's like one of their guys.
This is one of those where you looked at it and said, I don't know, because we talked the other day, you need 4. Because we have 3 probably, McConnell and Collins and Murkowski, the usual, but now with the lineup, you need 4. Cassidy could be
off.
The 4th. It's not going to be Tom Tillis. Tillis will say, well, I thought he was really strong, he said. He did after the hearing. I thought he comported himself well.
His voice wasn't very strong. Yeah, I guess. And they may switch off.
It was just
a
as
different 3
bad
will
as
vote
XF.
no.
It was just as, I can't believe you're nominating somebody who is so incompetent and incapable of
and dying
running the
in front
thing
of
that
us.
you asked them to do. Oh, I thought it was great. Why shouldn't I vote for him?
Yeah. There will be plenty. Also pointed out, just from his history, and he may have spoken a little bit about it at the hearing or something, but somebody was pointing out just in terms of your basic, white privilege, although, I don't know, leatheran privilege. He's got a different color face as well. Pointing out, I'd like to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. I should point out along the way, just, for transparency's sake, I was a heroin addict for 14 years. And it's not a lot of minority candidates would be able to just shrug that off but I'm better now. I thought I sound healthy.
Oh, I don't drink like Kexeth.
Yeah, right. So whatever. Okay, that's what you can do these days. By the way, the whole thing, the whole parade of total incompetence being confirmed nonetheless, again, in a logical world would be a huge stick in the eye of their whole, DEI claims. We got to stop these DEI hires. They're hiring these unqualified people. Wow, this guy's never done anything but drink on the job. And this guy over here, heroin addict for 14 years and knows nothing about the system he's supposed to be taking over. But ding. What do you know? Two white guys.
It's regional. We got to have somebody from Hyannis.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's it. We need somebody from a remote windswept island. All right.
So my segment today is going to be short. I'm going to be done by 9:45. I have some other stuff to do, unfortunately. But this is a piece from The Conversation, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yes.
Let's have a conversation about this conversation piece. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s nomination signals a new era of anti-intellectualism in American politics.
Oh.
While anti-intellectual and populism are nothing new in American life, there's hardly been an administration that's seemingly committed to these worldviews.
Maybe
For
it's just dumb.
example, Kennedy.
Right.
Intellectual attacks on the scientific community have been increasing and have become more partisan in recent years. And he epitomizes the new American political ethos of populism and anti-intellectualism, or the idea that people hold negative feelings not just toward scientific research, but those who produce it.
I see.
Which is why MAGA cheered when Fauci's protective detail was pulled.
Yes.
Because they'd be happy if something happened to him.
Nothing
This
like-
rhetoric filtered into public discussion. They actually say that in the next paragraph. As seen in viral social media posts mocking and attacking scientists like Anthony Fauci, or anti-mask protesters confronting health officials at public meetings and elsewhere. Trump and Kennedy have cast doubt on vaccine safety and the medical scientific establishment. As far back as 2016, Trump falsely asserted that childhood vaccines cause autism. And Kennedy's vaccine skepticism has long been well documented, except at the hearing in the transcript, you won't find it on the Republican side, only the Democratic side. And this is notable because the populism goes across the political spectrum. And this touches on a point that I think is really important. When the government screws up, like Obama did with trying to push all of these NAFTA and similar deals that essentially said, here's our bargain. You will get cheap goods from overseas. And so even though you don't have a job now, you'll be able to afford it.
Yeah.
Now, is that exactly, well, let me tell you, that's the way they look at it in Ohio.
Sure.
And so what happens there is it completely discredits the whole idea of globalism.
Yeah.
Which then leads to why should we help Ukraine? Let's look inward, America first, isolation, yada. I mean, it has big ramifications, even if you don't understand what neoliberal is.
Yes. All right.
Okay. So the pandemic was a complete and total screw up. And by the way, remind me who was president during the pandemic?
The basketball face guy. Trump. Right.
But the screw up, the lies, the cheating, the arguments did not sit well with the public because the experts did not, like Deborah Birx, didn't, even though MAGA hates her now, they didn't. Well,
they hate everybody. Mike Pompeo.
But they didn't come out of this with a sense that they were in charge, they knew what was going on, they explained it well, and so we bought into what was happening. That's just the opposite.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you can't handle a pandemic, why should we trust you about anything? And there's always been this vaccine skeptic Hollywood crowd, Marin County and elsewhere. And oh my gosh, look at the pandemic. We were right. Of course, that one thing has nothing to do with the other, but that's the attitude.
Yeah.
And so on the right, you have government health agencies is colluding with multinational pharmaceutical companies to impose excessive regulation. On the left, you have attacks against big pharma for manipulating the healthcare system. And so the goal of a populist is to portray the elites on both sides as the enemy of the people and to root out the corruption. And this is a very appealing argument. I'm not saying that this non-nuanced, simplistic view of the world is correct. It usually is not. You know, it's, who is it, Mencken? There's, for every problem, there's a solution that is simple, elegant, and wrong.
Yeah, it's okay.
You know, whoever said that and whatever the exact quote was.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before.
That's what this is. And so populism is always wrong. However, it's popular. Populism isn't automatically popular, but right now it is. And so when people are taking this view, they say, okay, well, the Democratic Party is associated with this science expert thingy. I'm voting for Republicans.
Aww.
And that happened in the last election. And that's why when the people who don't normally vote and don't pay attention to politics show up at the polls every 4 years, this is the kind of thing that brings them out and makes them vote Republican.
Interestingly enough, it seems to be the case. Even
so,
though,
you know, that's why I think it's worthwhile paying attention. There's no way Kennedy should be anywhere near this position, any more than Hegseth, and both of them might get there because there's no trust whatsoever with institutions, science, scientists, by the public. And so the public says, all right, well, Trump, like that aircraft crash in D.C., is merely relatedly suggesting things that I myself feel. So why wouldn't I go along with it?
Maybe. I don't know. The logic of it escapes me, but what can I tell you? We hate the elites and science and overeducated nerds. Let's vote for the Ivy Leaguers who are coming here to tell us. We actually hated the Ivy League. We thought it really sucked.
Yeah, let a guy from Wharton tell you about what people on the street think.
Yeah.
Anger at elites. Why then is disdain for scientific experts appealing to so many Americans? Much of the public supports this worldview because of perceived ineffectiveness and moral wrongs. Opioid crisis encouraged by predatory pharmaceutical companies. The left is right about that. The right is wrong about a lot of things, but it doesn't matter from the public's point of view.
Yeah.
Public confusion, dissatisfaction with changing health guidance in the early stages of COVID, the frequently prohibitive cost of healthcare and medicine. They have given Americans reasons to question their trust in science and medicine, as if the senators who write policy, the ones who say, let's put more flights into National Airport because it's convenient for me, are somehow experts on aviation.
Yeah.
They're not. The regulations and the people who write them are completely separate, unfortunately, from the experts. They get experts to testify. Sometimes they even hire them as staff.
Right.
But they themselves aren't experts. And what they're doing is they're making policy decisions which are supposed to balance the public's need with what the experts say. In fact, it's usually something else. It's usually completely corrupt and just, for me. And so the public looks at this and says, I'm not buying this stuff that the experts say this is okay. Because look at you people who claim to be experts in Congress. You're lawyers. You claim to be experts in the law. And you're saying that Trump is immune? Come on. I don't trust lawyers anymore either. I mean, I don't trust anybody. It's pervasive. It is so easy to see why the general public, the voting public, has lost faith with experts. Yes,
that's true. And I have parked somewhere. I don't know. You got to go. I'll have to send this to you separately. But there's a great thread here on Blue Sky from a political scientist, Kevin Elliott, who in convenient chart form explains kind of what's going on here and why, the bafflement of Democrats and technocrats, essentially, as to what's happening here. Why is this not working? Why are people saying, I actually prefer the incompetent idiots over the people who know what they're doing? And it has to do with adopting an entirely different view of politics and what it's for and why you use it and what it's supposed to produce for you. That is prevalent among MAGA types and populist types. And there's the prevailing view among Democratic-leaning voters is increasingly archaic. And he's comparing, but reminding everybody that the model that has been the prevalent Washington consensus for the past X number of decades is a view that lies somewhere between a sort of pluralist politics, as he labels it, and technocratic politics. In other words, you're either attempting to just, use science and logic and technology to come up with solutions to problems that people in America have, or balancing the equities among the varying groups of people in America such that you can come to a consensus solution. But that those two things, though they've been the consensus for a long time, aren't the only game in town. And you can, in fact, look at politics as, no, what it is a mechanism for bashing people I don't like and taking stuff from them and giving it to me and other people I do like. It's kind of a more primitive politics, but it is out there, and it's a historical model.
Is in the Oval Office.
Yes, exactly it. So he's got this great chart of technocratic politics and what they think about how politics is supposed to work, pluralist politics, and then what he calls friend-enemy politics. That's how you decide where resources go. Give them to friends, take them from enemies. Not balance the equities, not, well, what makes the most sense logically, but give me stuff and take it from them.
Well, the egalitarian part of it is what's so frustrating, because the people who are annoyed at the experts, for some reason, are completely inured or unfamiliar with the egalitarian part of this. They're just like, no, Trump doesn't do that. He would never do that.
Right. No,
he does it all the time. He made his whole career doing that.
We take stuff from bad America and give it to great America. That's not bad.
So I got to run, but I do want to mention one piece before I go, and that is not necessarily a piece, but a factoid. We're expecting on Saturday, which is 2 days from now, the new Democratic National Committee chair to be elected.
Okay.
And I just came across a piece that said that Nancy Pelosi has backed Wisconsin State Party Chair Ben Wickler.
Uh-oh. I don't know what to make of that.
Also, Schumer is backing Wickler.
All right. Well, that's good news. It will be very interesting, considering you and I know pretty well who the Wickler fan base is. Again, this is among DNC members. This is not up to us, unfortunately. There's lots of ways, lots of reasons you it's not, and lots of ways you can make it be up to you, but it takes several decades of work. What'll be interesting is knowing their fan base and how bitterly they just complain. Friggin' Nancy Pelosi just blew it for AOC. I can't stand. Schumer's an idiot. And now they're backing the same guy. Well, only because they're stupid and stumbled into it. I'll be very interested to see what they think about it. Meanwhile, I also have seen other people saying, well, my primary interest is environment and climate change, and I actually back a different guy. But it's happening. It'll be interesting and contentious, and we'll have a circular firing squad. But hopefully we'll come out with somebody who says, "Come on."
It's not one of those things where you know in advance who's going to win.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to predict, particularly voting among DNC members. And I know everybody complains about this every time we have to elect a new DNC chair because they're not being appointed by a new Democratic president. You're doing it in the atmosphere of crap. We just lost a major election, and every couple of cycles like this, people then discover, I have no input in this. That sucks. I thought we were the Democratic Party. Yeah, this is the process. This is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. The people who vote for this are the members of that committee. It's their chairperson, not yours.
Right. You're not on the committee. Anyway, take care.
Yeah,
and I'll
you
talk
too.
To you on Monday. Maybe
All right.
by then we'll have a new chair.
Right. Unless, do you think any of them will say, I demand a recount. This whole thing was a hoax.
I demand a discount furniture store.
Bob's Discount Furniture. That's available now.
Yep.
All right. Very good.
Take care.
Have a great weekend. Take care of those errands, and we'll see you later. All right. So, yes, good reminder to everybody. I think we've been over this topic a couple of times, but it has been fascinating watching the DNC chair campaign sort of shape up, and a whole new crop of people. This is, and it's normal and totally understandable, and I condemn no one for it, but this is something that happens pretty much every time we then have to, you lose a big election, and when you lose the election for the White House, I guess we should explain it in reverse. When you win the White House and there's a Democratic president, the Democratic president typically more or less says, this is the person I want chairing the Democratic National Committee. The Democratic National Committee is really almost exclusively geared toward the campaign for the presidency and not much else. And people have this weird misunderstanding that all policy, everything everybody ought to be doing in Congress is going to be driven by the DNC. There's marching orders given. This is how to be a Democrat from here on in. That they're, and really the only relationship that day-to-day politics in the media has with the DNC is that the DNC chair is somebody that news talk show producers have in their Rolodex as this will make sense on the Chiron if I say I've solicited the opinion of the Democratic National Committee chair for this issue about politics. But it's really just not their bailiwick. Usually they're about organizing the conventions and facilitating the growth of the party apparatus, and then every 4 years running a presidential campaign under their banner. And that's about it. They really don't. That's not the group that's going to be leaning on a wayward Democratic senator and telling them you need to change your tune, or can we come to this compromise, or can't you at least not say this, that, or the other thing in public. That's not what the DNC does. But the thing I wanted to explain was when the Democrats win the White House, the president says more or less, I want to appoint this is the person I want to be chair of the DNC, and they usually accede to that and say, you're the head of the party and you can have that prerogative. We'll support you in that and put your person in place. When you lose the campaign for the White House, then there's no obvious head of the party who has the prerogative and the support of Democratic National Committee members in general to simply name a new chair. I mean, it can happen, but it's not expected, and it's more of an open contest. And it's usually, of course, a contest between various people who say, I know why we lost, and I know how to fix it. And they're probably all right in one way or another, but, who knows whether anybody has the complete comprehensive solution. But at any rate, then you run, and it really has only been in the last couple of cycles that people have even paid attention, in my view, in my memory of things anyway. And some of it predates me anyway, and my ability to remember things politically. But yeah, essentially, it's a pretty small scale and closed campaign. Only in the mass media era and the social media era has it become something that the or not even rank and file, but just average Democratic leaning voters pay any attention to. But this happens more or less every time now that people are paying attention to it, and they say, I think so-and-so should be the chair. And usually, it's a very small percentage of the Democratic voting population that even has any awareness of it. But it does happen from time to time, and they get upset. Can't you see that this person has the support of so many more Democratic voters out there than this? Well, it's not a foregone conclusion, but I can see your argument. Well, why are they leaning towards this other person when they should be using this fantastic person that we like? And the answer is you're not the electorate again, it is the chair of the Democratic National Committee. And then they get upset. They, research things and say, well, there's only 400 and something members of the Democratic National. I think it's actually more than that, but but it's some limited number of people. How come this small closed circle gets to decide? I thought we were the Democratic Party. Well, we are. And the constituency of the committee votes for their chairperson. But, well, how come I can't get a vote? Or do you know that out of the, I can't even remember, 400 number or so of Democratic National Committee members, and then on top of that, there's members of Congress. Well, they're already insiders. The fix is in. Union presidents and yada, yada, and big donors, and it's not fair. And it isn't to a certain extent. But again, this is where we have this conversation every couple of years. You can get there. You can't just simply say, typically, I want to be on the Democratic National Committee, vote me in there. There's a whole process, but you work your way into it. And we reminded people, you can just walk in off the street and be a member of the local Democratic Party apparatus in almost every location. They're desperate for people, and if you walk in and say, I'm willing to keep coming to the meetings and help plan things and do things, you'll be in. And you can say, as a matter of fact, I'm so good at it after a certain period of time there, you can say, I've demonstrated my abilities and dedication to this. Why don't you send me on to the county Democratic Committee? And very often they'll oblige in that too, because people say, oh, responsibility to go to more meetings. You want to do it? You can do it. Go ahead. And from there, if you work and take it seriously and give your time and effort to, as a member of the county committee, to all of the things that the state party needs to do, you can ask then too, after a couple of years there, will you send me on to the state committee and representing our county? And will you consider me one of the leaders of the county organization, given the work I've been doing here? Move on to the state party, right? You're there for a couple of years, whatever, move up the ranks. I would like to chair the state committee, and that's more difficult. But again, not a large number of people in most states, particularly red-leaning states in the presidential elections, who are willing to take on the responsibilities of state chair. But if you do, guess what? As state chair, you get to go to the Democratic National Committee meetings and vote for Democratic National Committee chair. It's a long road. Who gets to do it? I know it sounds very unfair, doesn't it? The people who get to vote on this stuff, I don't get a vote. I thought we were Democratic. The people who get a vote are the people who have spent 10, 15 more years working on every election, good times and bad, wins and losses, who have been there for the county Democratic organization, the state Democratic organization, and now are entrusted with the national Democratic organization, and they get to vote. And people who say, I just started paying attention last year and I would like to have XYZ person. I want AOC to be the chair. Whatever it is, it'd be a good choice. Don't get me wrong, but she's not interested. But I know you have an opinion, but do you have anything to back up why your opinion is one that needs to be listened to on this very limited question of who gets to chair the committee? And believe me, again, I got nothing against it. And I can't condemn anybody who's just arriving at this realization. I only will say we've done this before. And what's really interesting to me is that they say, well, we got to get rid of these dinosaurs that are running the place. And the dinosaurs that are running the place, ironically enough, are people who went through this exact same exasperation and then had the process explained to them when they wanted to see Howard Dean elected as chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And he was, and he did a great job. And it took organizing and it took work. And when they succeeded, they stuck around and they were then county committee chair and state committee chair. And now they're on the DNC. But now they're the dinosaurs that the new people want to push out, which was amazing because when they were running the first time, they said, we need to run for the DNC because we got to push out all the dinosaurs. And I told them, one day you'll be a dinosaur. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And as I was saying when we were fading into the break, that's the most remarkable part of all of this. I definitely remember advising angry Dean supporters who had no real reason to be angry, but they were angry that it wasn't going to be a given necessarily that Howard Dean was going to win, but Dean supporters angry that they didn't. How come they won't let me into the meeting to cast my ballot for Howard Dean to be chair of the party? Because I'm a very big supporter of his and of the party's. And maybe I gave a lot of money. Maybe I worked my butt off during the election, even, and feel like I should be entitled to a say in all of this. And we were explaining to them, I wish you were, but you aren't. And the time to have secured the right to have that voice was, time to start working on it was 10 years ago. It's one of those things you realize at the moment, like, gosh, now I wish I had a voice in all this. If only I had spent the 10 years. And you think, well, too late now. But it's not too late now because you could be setting yourself up for the next one in 10 years. And if, in fact, following Howard Dean's election, you did, in fact, involve yourself because you believed in Howard Dean's message for the as DNC chair, whatever it is, or you just were like, I just want to be able to have a voice next time, you could very well be in position to have a voice in this one. And what's interesting is, of course, now there's a whole new crop of people out there saying, this idiot has a voice. Well, who is he? He's just some party flunky. What a jerk. I never heard of this guy. How come he gets a vote? And it's because After not getting a vote for Howard Dean, he went out and spent the time working his way up the ladder, and now he's finally getting a chance to vote as DNC on the DNC chair, and finding out he's a fat cat elite. Chuck him out. We hate his guts. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, I only wanted to point that out because I did in explaining to people then, there is a way for you to get in on this action. And there's a reason why you're not in on it now, and there's a reason for you to get in on it, and it's not easy, and it takes time, but I want it now, and I know everybody wants it now. You're not unusual in that respect, and you're not wrong. I want it now too, but this is how it's done, and if you have the patience, you can actually go and do it. But I did warn them then and there that what you're doing, by the way, at that point is you are campaigning as a Deaniac or whatever, even if you hated that terminology, to get yourself in there to bring this ethos eventually to the Democratic National Committee so that from now on we would only elect good, smart people who know what they're doing, like I think that they're all right. But what you're doing is you're campaigning to, push the dinosaurs out. But the dinosaurs at that point were like Watergate baby people who got involved in politics because Nixon was a jackass, and we got to have a real, he's a crook, and we got to have a real response, and the Democrats need to stand up and take advantage of this opportunity, and they worked, and but at the time the bulk of them were like, well, how come I can't go and vote for the new DNC chair? This sucks. We really need the vitality and energy of the young people in this country to put the Democrats in a position to take advantage of pushing Nixon out and the Watergate fallout. But we can't. But we can start the work on it, and then they eventually do come in to power, and they are in place, having started their political careers in the shadow of Watergate. And then the Dean people are saying, these are the dinosaurs we need to push out. But they have just achieved the power that they set out to accrue to themselves post-Watergate. And now it's time for them to go. Well, that's the way the cycle runs. It doesn't work for a little while. They get another 10 years in office before the Dean forces are entirely or people who came up in the Dean era are entirely in charge. And when they finally get to the top, I told them the cycle will come around for you. There will be another Democratic cohort who will think that you are the ossified dinosaurs who don't know anything about the way things really work today. And it might even be true by that point, but you won't feel that way. You won't see yourselves that way. You'll see yourself as the revolutionaries who finally succeeded and now have a hand in running the place. And believe me, I understand what your concerns are. They were my concerns when I was coming up, so I'm going to be responsive to your concerns. I might even vote for the same person as you, but that might not be enough. Or it'll be okay for now because there won't be any elections for the DNC membership for some time, and people who are just starting now won't be in a position to run seriously for those positions. But anyway, it's just an ongoing cycle, and it's kind of interesting to watch it happen for the third, fourth, fifth time. But everybody insisting that their time through it is unique and different. And in many ways it is. The atmosphere has changed. Communication strategy will have changed, and it'll change again. But yeah, if there's an AOC or Ben Wickler cohort that wins out and takes over the DNC and does, let's say, a bang-up job and everything's fantastic, win the White House once, twice, 3 times would be fantastic, and then eventually it goes the other way and there needs to be another election. All the people who started out here saying, how come I never get a vote? Oh, this is how I actually get a vote. Okay, I'll start and I'll put in the work, and find themselves in the DNC 10, 15 years from now as a AOC Ben Wickler Democrat. There's going to be somebody out there who just says, I don't know. I don't know who it's going to be. But my guy, my person is the new voice of Democrats. And can you believe these old farts who like this? They still run around saying her name's, they still call her AOC like she needs a real hip nickname. Come on, she's 60 years old and we're tired of this crap. Or 80 years old, whatever it might be. And whenever this happens, they'll There'll be a dinosaur one day. I'm just saying. All right. Well, anyway, I found that very interesting just as a development, and it'll be very interesting to see how things shake out and who's mad about what once this is all done. But hopefully we can all come together and have a great time supporting one another, etc., etc. Okay. That's it. So let's see. Other things to touch on. I mentioned earlier, now I'm going to go ahead and do it. Kevin Elliott, this political scientist, if you are interested, really have no choice at this point. Political theorist studying democracy, ethics, and institutions. Author of Democracy for Busy People is Kevin Elliott. And he's got a whole web page and everything. kevinjelliott.net if you want to take a look. And this I found really interesting. And I think maybe Brandon Friedman might have circulated this. And I saw it, and it was very clarifying. And I think he said so. And I said, let me find out. Do I agree? And I do. So here's the chart. I know this is difficult to visualize the chart. I'll have a link for it. You can take a look at it. But basically, it's this. As we said, there's several different approaches to politics that are legitimate in their own right. Some of them feel more archaic than others. But here's the deal. Kevin writes back on January 23rd, end of last week, Ezra Klein's most recent podcast. I haven't heard it, but, correctly identifies that there's been a regime change in the U.S. government, and it's not hard to come to that conclusion. And he even uses a game metaphor at one point, but because he doesn't know about the multiple games framework, I don't either, he flounders by falling into his default technocratic mode of analysis. Now I'm starting to get the idea here. But what do you mean? Technocratic mode of analysis. And, I certainly can inherently understand the idea of, well, some of the pundits don't get it because they're just stuck in the old ways, or they think that politics is about something that it just isn't anymore. But I can't put my finger on it. But that's what Kevin's done here with this chart. So he has 3 different types of politics listed in the chart, and then 3 different aspects of politics and what people think politics is for and what it's supposed to do and how it works. So it's a 3x3 grid here. The types of politics, you heard about Ezra Klein coming from a technocratic mode of analysis. Technocratic politics, pluralist politics is the next one over here, actually, and they're listed in the opposite order. Like we read things, of course, left to right. I'm reading the categories from right to left because I think we probably come more from this side, the technocratic pluralist politics. And then there is what we would regard as MAGA politics, as gimmitarian politics on this show, what is labeled here as friend-enemy politics. All right, what's going on? What do you mean? Define your terms. And the best way to define the terms is to read what's in the chart. First line up, and I'm going to read these from top to bottom. That's the axis we're now reading along, and we do read things from top to bottom normally. I'm not going to do it from the bottom up. This makes more sense from the top down. Social ontology of politics. What? I don't even... What do you mean? Ontology. Some of you instantly... Oh, I know what they mean by ontology. I don't. Not offhand. But there's a helpful explanation here. That is, what's the social ontology of politics? It's the question of what is the political world made of? All right, I understand all the words in that, but I still am not clear on what you're talking about. Well, okay, fine. A technocratic politics person is the kind of person who answers the question, what is the political world made of? Well, the world is composed of individuals who experience common problems. There are no groups and no identities necessarily, or it's certainly not something that should be hard and fast. But, okay, that still doesn't really clear things up. So now I feel like I want to read down the chart all the way. Tell me everything about technocratic politics. Again, the questions are, what is the political world made of? The second question, what is the task of politics? What do we think we're doing in politics. The third question, what is the goal of politics? What does politics generate? What do we get out of it? What's the end product of politics, right? So what's the political world made up of? What do we think we're doing here? And what are we supposed to be generating using the political process? A technocratic politics person thinks of the world as comprised of individuals who experience common problems, and the task of politics is solving those problems. Now, a lot of you probably think, well, duh, yeah, that is exactly what politics is. But it's not the only game in town. That's the point of this chart. The world is comprised of any number of people. They may or may not decide to divide themselves up into groups, but that's not how I view it. I view it as people who have a problem with housing. We need to come up with a housing solution for those people, solving social problems. What is the goal of politics? What does politics generate for technocrats? Effective policy, right? That politics is about, okay, yes, you have to get elected first. We're always saying this with Craig. You got to get elected to office first, and then you can formulate effective policy. What is effective policy? It is policy that solves social problems. Is it ideological in nature? Do we yell at people? Do we scream at people? Do we say that person didn't vote for me, so I'm going to withhold the solution in technocratic politics? No, we do not. Individuals have problems. The more common they are, the more costly they are, the more necessary to come up with a solution that solves that problem. The point of politics is to implement effective policy, stuff that works. If it is against the Democratic Party ideology but works very well, then to hell with it. We should be doing it. Maybe the Democratic ideology is wrong. We should change it so that most technocratic politicians, I think, are working in the Democratic Party. And it's probably because it's the party out of the two that's more adaptable, I think, in terms of, all right, this has not been a part of our overall approach to ideology, but it works really well. We're in favor of stuff that works really well for a lot of people and solves their problems. And we think that if we solve those problems, people will say, you know what? I appreciate having my big problem solved. Who solved it? Those guys? I'll vote for them. But is that how life works? Well, there's another competing model that we also may be very familiar with and has also got a home among Democrats. And, used to have, I don't even know if it ever had a home among Republicans, but there were once some technocratic Republicans. But what about pluralist politics? Again, our three questions. What is the political world made of? Ontology. What is the political world made of? Pluralists say, well, the world is made up of not individuals per se, the way technocratic politicians think, but the world is made up of innumerable groups of people who must find ways to live together. Identity is central. And, we're being told right away, identity politics is terrible. We got to get rid of the identity politics. It's bad. Why? Interestingly, identity politics can be attacked from the left or the right. But maybe left or right doesn't really make a great deal of sense here. It can be attacked by technocrats as, well, it doesn't really matter what group you identify with. We're interested in solving problems that everybody's got. Every member of this group has this problem, or some members of each group have got this problem. It doesn't really matter what group you belong to. If you have this problem, we want to solve it for you. But you can also be attacked from, the right side, of the spectrum, or this other third game, the friend-enemy politics, that the identity politics is terrible. You're getting in the way of things. My preferred solution, and it's because you're saying we need this, that, or the other thing, or you need to take our needs into consideration because we're this group, and I'm not that group, so I don't like that. And And that's the attack. Anyway, I should run down these columns instead and just explain who everybody is. Pluralist politics. The world is made up of innumerable groups who must find ways to live together. I think we can all kind of think, we have a lot of that going on in the Democratic Party. Identity is central. And we might not even agree with that identity is central, but the idea of identity makes some sense. What group are you most closely in affinity with? What is there a group that you identify with that helps us better understand right off the bat in an elevator pitch where you're coming from and what your interests might be? And, you could be members of plenty of them. The next question then, the task of politics. What do we think we're doing in politics? Pluralist politicians think the function here is conciliation of different groups and their competing interests, right? We've heard that and thought that probably a lot. The art of politics here for pluralist politicians is to, we got to find out what you need. We find out what you need, and we got to find a way to balance this stuff such that we can all live together in peace. We have resources to distribute. We have burdens to bear. We have different reasons for believing that we have this, that, or the other need, and that that the burden of fulfilling those needs should fall elsewhere or should be shared with others. What is the goal of politics for the pluralist politician? Fair compromise. I think we're for that too, right? So these are two things that have big homes in the Democratic Party, I think. What's the point of politics for you? Finding fair compromise among competing interests. Finding effective policy that solves problems. In fact, those things seem to me to go hand in hand. There are certainly ways, I could see leaning toward one or the other in certain circumstances, but those two are generally Democratic ideals among members of the party. And then the third column. And by the way, the existence of three columns, I think Kevin Elliott would tell you, is not to imply that there can't be a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh column, but that this is generally what you'll find happening in the United States at the moment anyway. And that is friend-enemy politics. Really what I've called gimmitarian politics kind of overlaps pretty well with this. Ask those questions about friend-enemy politics and tell me who you think is practicing this. What is the political world made of? The person answers, the world is made up of friends and enemies. This is black and white stuff. Well, sometimes literally black and white. The world is made up of friends and enemies. There is no neutrality. There is no fairness. Identity is overriding. So for the people who are now screaming, identity politics is terrible from the right, what I mean is your identity politics, my identity politics, wearing a MAGA hat, screaming about kicking people out or throwing them into Guantanamo, another of the big stories of the day, even though I also think that's a fake story in some ways, but you got to watch out for it. For them, identity is overriding. There's nothing but identity politics in their world. They just don't think that's true because I'm good. They're the ones who are bad, and I heard identity politics is bad. Therefore, that must be what you're doing. It's also what you're doing. No, it isn't. Okay. So, friend-enemy politics. What do we think we're doing in politics? What is the task of politics? If you know somebody who answers, the task of politics is for the virtuous us to defeat the evil them. What party is that person in? Now, mind you, there are certainly some Democrats who say that should actually be our purpose now, except the evil them is the MAGA nuts and Donald Trump. And they're not wrong. But they also think at bottom, if they were to seize power back absolutely, they would at some point revert to saying, I think most Democrats, well, now that we've conquered the wackadoodles and put them in jail and we can get back to business, what business is it that we want to get back to? Probably the business of fair compromise and effective policy. If we think we can maintain that Anyway, so there you go. Friend-enemy politics. The world is made up of friends and enemies. There is no such thing as neutrality or fairness. Identity, in fact, is overriding. The purpose, the task of politics is for the virtuous us to defeat the evil them. And finally, what is the goal of politics for these people? What does politics generate? And the answer is it generates public tokens of our domination or the enemy's defeat. Gosh, this explains just about everything that MAGA is up to. It doesn't matter to me whether the policy is effective. It doesn't matter to me whether it's a fair compromise. Get those immigrants out here. But you're not going to be able to eat. I don't care. It's a public token of our domination and the enemy's defeat. Okay? No vaccines. I don't want it. Oh, but you'll die. And many other people who don't want to die and who believe in vaccines will also die because you'll never get to herd immunity, which is not something that occurs naturally, really, not for human disease the way we work today, but could be accomplished if the vast majority of the herd was vaccinated. I don't want it. It doesn't matter to me that it's effective. I don't trust you. You're a them, and I'm against you. Well, what about people who do believe in this thing and would like to protect themselves and their families? No, F them. And no to masks, too. But wouldn't it be a fair compromise to let people who want to wear masks wear masks? No, ban masks for everybody because they make me uncomfortable. Not a fair compromise, but it doesn't matter in friend-enemy politics. Doesn't it feel like it explains a lot to you and vindicates a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of gimmitarianism? But it's a real political framework, and people by the millions are adopting it. It's sort of, like I said, kind of archaic. It feels like that's the sort of thing that a more enlightened society would move towards. Well, shouldn't we be somewhere between pluralist politics and technocratic politics? The fact is, we're not all going to be the same all the time, but we can be treated equally under the law and thereby reach fair compromise and probably effective policy almost by accident if we can just pay attention to democratic principles. But, there's a whole world out there besides democracy and compromise and effective policy. And our wonks are kind of stuck in that, and they're baffled by, I don't understand. I keep reading these articles in diners about people who are like, yeah, he's going to hurt me. Yeah, he's going to eat my face. I can't wait. Give me more. No, these people have got to be crazy. Well, maybe. Or they're just playing a completely different game. And they may not even realize that it's a completely different game. They just feel like, cool, I'm winning. Well, anyway, Kevin Elliott has a little bit more to say in a thread besides just this chart. But the chart, I think, is the key to it. And he goes on to, remember, he has just said, Ezra Klein's most recent podcast correctly identifies that there's been a regime change in the U.S. government. That is, it's not being run by people who are any kind of hybrid of pluralist or technocratic politicians anymore. They're being run by friend-enemy politicians. And the rest of us have never seen it and don't get it and thought of it as childlike and primitive. But here it is. So anyway, he says Ezra correctly identifies it. He even uses a game metaphor at one point. But because he doesn't know about the multiple games framework, that you could play any one of these games, he flounders by falling into his default technocratic mode of analysis. So it sounds to me like the error here is Ezra Klein is such a technocrat, and he is, that I guess you can be such a technocrat that you don't even recognize pluralist politics. You probably do, though. It's closely enough related. But you don't recognize friend-enemy stuff as being politics. Politics is a game played by mature people who understand that you can't win everything and you can't just use politics to grab stuff from other people and keep it for yourself. That's not what it's about. Oh, it absolutely can be what it's about. You hope for better, but yeah, technocrats, if you just live your life among them And if you went to college and studied political science, in all likelihood, they told you, yeah, this is kind of where we are right now. You want to study modern American politics. This is kind of how we run things. This is the Washington consensus. And you don't realize things can be different for other people. So, okay, he goes on and he flounders by falling into his default technocratic mode of analysis. He recognizes that MAGA is about who gets to be an American, who's a friend and who's an enemy, as seen by the birthright citizenship executive order. That's progress. But then he falls into analyzing the policy implications of the executive order, right? As most people we know did. Well, they're going to, that doesn't make any sense. That's not the way the Constitution intended. It's going to have these consequences. It could denaturalize people. The food chain's going to fall apart, right? Analyzing the policy implications. All right, and I'm way behind here for the break. I know that's going to make the editor mad. But no, bad Ezra, Kevin says. You're talking technocratic politics about a friend-enemy issue. You're not likely to get it that way. Translating the state of American politics into the terms of the framework, since Trump took over the Republican Party, the game of politics on the right has been in friend-enemy mode. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A little bit late, I know, but we'll try and fix this in post. Don't worry about it. And if you're hearing it only having been fixed in post, don't worry. It's all good now. All right, but let me, I'll finish up with this fascinating chart, although he does some great explaining of the chart along the way. I think we actually, did do that explaining already, but in this thread. So again, he's commenting on Ezra Klein's initial inability. I think he's plenty capable of coming to an understanding about this and realizing he just needs somebody to give him a framework to work in here. But it's a good reminder. Ezra Klein is kind of like the quintessential type of technocrat, right? His journalist role kind of demands this worldview for himself, at least, not to analyze people and their issues and their problems and needs in society through grouping and identifying them in that fashion. That all people deserve solving of their social problems to the extent that we can do it with effective policy. But that does make it less likely that you're going to gain any insight or inherent understanding of what game the MAGA people are playing, right? Again, he recognizes that MAGA is about who gets to be an American, who's a friend and who's an enemy, as seen through birthright citizenship executive orders. And so that's progress. But he then falls into analyzing the policy implications of the executive order. No, bad Ezra, as Kevin says. You're talking technocratic politics about a friend-enemy issue. The next tweet in this thread, translating the state of American politics into the terms of the framework. Since Trump took over the Republican Party, the game of politics on the right has been in the friend-enemy mode. Meanwhile, Democrats have continued to do politics mostly in the pluralist mode with some technocratic pockets. And, that's a great explanation, and it may also help us understand a little bit more about why the response seems so inept. I mean, it's such a, primitive might makes right and thuggish sort of approach to to politics to say, me good, you bad, and separate things that way, and even be willing to take it on the chin every once in a while and hurt yourself in order to say, well, I'm really hurting is my enemy in all of this, even if it's hurting you. And so for the answer to that to come from the Democratic side, the partisan political game rather than the policy setting political game being, well, that's bad for several reasons. And we actually saw a 46.2% decline in XYZ metric and it seems like you're not even talking the same language. You're not. And this explains why that is. Now, Kevin goes on to say what's happened since the 2024 election, maybe a little earlier, is that U.S. politics has moved from a version of the political game at the national level that was predominantly governed by the norms, rules, and expectations of the pluralist game of politics into friend-enemy mode. And this gives you a little bit of a pause, like if you say, for instance, we should be dealing with everything the way AOC does. And I have that feeling in many ways, or at least that she's an effective communicator. She knows how to hit back hard and that you don't let things slide and, speak the language as people understand it, not this highfalutin stuff about statistics, because that's more of a technocratic approach to things. But, then you have to stop and wonder, am I cheering for a shift among Democrats toward friend-enemy politics? Maybe. That's one way of looking at it. Vote against every single Trump nominee, no matter who it is. After all, they're all incompetent. They are. That's true. That's actually a technocratic answer. There's no way that they can implement effective policy, and they're not interested in solving social problems. I'm against that. I'm against those people. I won't be voting for them. And the opposite answer is not particularly convincing either. Well, I'll vote against the absolute worst of them, whoever that might be. I'm sure that's subjective too. But to signal that I'm not an unreasonable person, I will also vote for the ones that are not inherently as garbage as the worst of the worst. So I might let Rubio through. I might be okay with Lee Zeldin. I'm not. I'm a no on all of them if I'm there. But whatever. But definitely not Pete Hegseth. Definitely not RFK Jr. But maybe okay with these people are saying Kristi Noem. She's way wacko, but she's done normal political work and been elected to things. Whatever your theory is, I'm going to show that I'm reasonable. In other words, that I can be bargained with and reach a fair compromise. Why? Because the goal of politics is fair compromise if you're a pluralist politician. The thing is, the other side is laughing their ass off because they're not playing that game. I don't understand. If you voted yes for me, great, it's a win. You're not my ally, but I did a win. I did a win thing, and you did a lose thing, and that's the difference between us. And I'm strongly strong, and you're weakly weak because you're for compromise, and I'm for domination. Okay, even though that's not the reason I voted for the person. And I don't feel dominated. I was just trying to be fair. Some portion of your nominees should get through because you're the president after all. Well, that's the way, the president's entitled to his nominees, right? That's pluralist, technocratic politics people thinking. Although technocrats would say, well, he deserves his nominees because they have good technocratic solutions. If they don't, then you don't deserve that nominee. But a pluralist politician will say, I'm trying to reach some reasonable compromise with you. Kevin continues and says, not everybody's caught up to this. Indeed, without this framework, you're going to struggle to separate how you think politics should be done with how it is in fact done. Savvy political observers tend to think pluralist politics is just what politics is. And I think I would say I've been guilty of that. I guess I'm learning different. That's true. But yeah, well, what you're doing is just thuggery. fair compromise and probably effective policy to some extent. That's what politics is. And you're ruining it. And now we can't even, and we're ruining it to such an extent that you are damaging your own constituency with bad policy and poor compromise. But they see it as a win because they're dumb. Well, they are. And this other kind of stuff is what politics is. The rest of it is, friend-enemy stuff is really just brute strength. And it's, in many ways, you're absolutely right if you think that it's not what politics is. If you have an election and say, vote for me, the friend-enemy guy, not that person, the pluralist woman in this case, right? But think more back to 2020. Vote for me, the friend-enemy guy, not him, the pluralist technocratic guy, Joe Biden. And then people came out and they voted for the technocrat pluralist guy instead. And you say, F it, no elections, mob the Capitol, hang them, kill them, use these forged electoral college certificates instead. Well, that's not politics. It isn't. That's just force. That's war. But as they sometimes teach you in political science, who said it? Is it Clausewitz? War is just politics by other means? Or was it backwards? Was it really that politics was war by other means? I don't think so. Politics by other means. Yeah, when the diplomatic let's vote, let's fight, but, let's not shed blood runs out and it doesn't work anymore, and you just go back to the old scheme, the more primitive game of politics, more primitive even than friend-enemy, but it largely results in this stuff. When you are broken down into friend-enemy, you go to war. And sure enough, here we are. We're going to invade Panama. We're going to make Canada the 51st state. We're going to take over Greenland. We haven't done it yet, but that's the threat. That's the main drive of friend-enemy politics. Both foreign and domestic, everything is friend-enemy. The weird thing is that one of the people that used to be considered an enemy even by pluralist technocrats is now considered a friend by friend-enemy politicians, Russia. Anyway, not everybody is caught up to this. Indeed, without this framework, you're going to struggle to separate how you think politics should be done within when, in fact, it is done. Savvy political observers tend to think pluralist politics just is what politics is. But it's not. It's one mode among others. And he sends you to more about it here. Is this just the... okay, so he begins. The next one in the thread is included here. More about it here. This is an old tweet of his, or Blue Sky post of his from 2 months ago. If you want the academic paper of it, right? This is probably a poor way of learning about the truth of friend-enemy politics. Why don't you go read this technocratic, essentially, political science peer-reviewed publication? But here it is. What is it? It's the abstract for the first complete draft of 3 games of politics. Let me know if you'd like to read it. He asked you 2 months ago, but now it's too late. Now you want to go read about it? There's some links here. And here's will the abstract from the article help us or hurt? Recent political developments have sent scholars on a wide-ranging search for appropriate concepts to make sense of them. This article advances a theoretical framework for understanding politics in which politics occurs in at least 3 modes. I suggest there could be more: friend-enemy, pluralist, and technocratic, and likens these modes to an interacting set of 3 games, each with its own end, rules, set of players, and characteristic moves. Drawing from the philosophy of games rather than game theory or games as a media frame, this multiple games framework highlights how the 3 political games coexist and influence each other in most polities today, often in different political spaces, and can change in prevalence as political actors competitively innovate or defect from the existing patterns of play. I demonstrate the framework's utility by showing how it uniquely illuminates democratic backsliding. That does imply the primitiveness that we're sliding back to, and some responses to it. I think now I would really like to have an explanation of the difference between the philosophy of games, game theory, and games as a media frame. That would be helpful as well. Anyway, before we turn all of this enlightening information into more confusing information, I thought we might break off at this point. This helped me clarify things a lot, just in terms of realizing I didn't learn more about what gimmitarians are doing. I think we were clear on that. But what helps me from this chart, what I've learned from this chart is this is part of why Democrats and Democratic favoring voters and pundits and experts don't really seem to get it. Like the friend enemy people say, blah, 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 whatever their policy is going to be. And we say to them, oh my God, don't you see that the policy you want is at least 32.9% less effective than the one we want? Duh. And they don't care. And they never will. And this helps remind you that that's a problem and might help you move toward finding language to respond with that they'll understand. Unfortunately, the language that they most understand is me hit you overhead with rock. And we're not willing to do that. But at least we'll have an understanding of what games are being played here, what it means to be playing games. I found it very interesting, and I hope you did too. All right, it is getting towards the end of the show. Tomorrow, I might as well tell you now, I will be off the air live. At least I'm going to be traveling and on the road, though I have the feeling things are relatively quiet in the world headquarters today, in the house, the world headquarters today, and there's so much to get to. Maybe I can find the time at some point today to record a little bit for tomorrow. Let me, before moving on then and choosing the next subject, about which I'll fret a great deal because it means leaving some other ones behind, instead take care of some other housekeeping news. More subscribers to welcome to our group, including, 2 new and 1 previous subscriber who has boosted their contribution, which is also a thing that you can do along the way. And that is Ellen Bieberman, who increased the Patreon contribution per month way back on the date that Kevin's tweet thread started on the 23rd. And then the very next day, on the 24th, Laura Kondrick joined us as a new subscriber, after which on the 26th, Jeffrey Scriff joined the ranks as well, and boosting us up back above the 150 paid subscriber mark for the first time in a long time. So I appreciate every one of you, including all the previous 149 who made it possible for that to boost us over the 150 mark. You're all very much appreciated. And you get me up in the morning and give me a purpose, because there's a lot of days I know where a lot of you are thinking, why don't I just pull the covers over my head and go back to bed? I actually am motivated by that and say, as tired as I am, and everybody knows what's going on. They all read the news. It's stupid. Everything is crazy. I can't explain anything anymore. There is no law. LOL, YOLO. Nothing matters. And I say, yeah, but at 9 o'clock, they're going to turn on the stream and they're going to say, what happened? And then is everything okay? Or is this the end? Are we never going to hear this again? And, I feel a real responsibility to get there to the microphone and say, to give you the familiar greeting before launching into all the craziness. And I hear from enough people that it gets them through even these terrible times that I worry, what if I didn't? And one good way of adding additional feeling of responsibility on top of that is if I also say, and they're paying good money. Now, I could make you pay more money, and then I'd feel even worse. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. We need to balance the equities here. But the point is, I say, look, these guys are committed to this enough so that they sign up for something that takes their money each month and gives it to me. And that's commitment. Now you got to be committed. So this is a great way to make sure that things continue in that vein, and I appreciate it. Just wanted to say so. All right, let's see. Other things. I mean, there's a million of them. and we only have a little bit of time. But luckily, we have one more day of the weekend, and maybe I can make myself record something for you on those grounds. All right, here's other things I need to share with you. Here I fulfill a commitment to, as a pluralist politician, to Scott Anderson, who gives above and beyond of his time in helping us produce this show, and also pointing out new and interesting articles. And here are two of them, both from the Bulwark. I would say you need to expand your sources here. If I were grading your paper, right, and I saw only Bulwark in the bibliography, I would say, now, come on. But they're two good pieces. Both are related to immigration. Again, a continuing issue, and we haven't even spent any time. I bet Justice has something on this one. Yesterday, Donald Trump, I think, winged it a little bit in announcing a new policy, which is about as dumb as you might expect. We're going to deport everybody, but we got to round them up first. Yes, that means concentration camps. But don't say concentration camps. Don't put in a paper that I said concentration camps. But where are you going to put them? I don't know, Texas or something. Or where are you going to hold these people? Well, anyway, like I said, I think he was winging it yesterday, and I think a lot of people probably think that might have been freelanced. He announced, I'm going to put them in Guantanamo Bay. We're going to have a new facility with 30,000 beds. I don't know what we got down there. 30,000 beds, as though we were going to just let them all take naps for a while. And we're going to store people. Why do we need to do that? Like, putting them in Texas made more sense if you were going to just ship them either to Mexico, Colombia, whatever. If they're headed south, why not put it there? Well, sure, Guantanamo is south. That's true too. But why Guantanamo? It's on the island of Cuba. We don't own Cuba yet. But we've got this base there. It's a terrible imposition as far as the Cuban people are concerned. But why a camp there? Like, that's south. That's true. But there's not discussion of increased plane and sea traffic shipping people back to South or Central America. It's a prison camp. What do we need to hold on to these people for? I thought we were trying to get rid of them. Well, why Guantanamo? And Trump apparently says, because some of these people are so bad that even the countries they came from, they won't take them back. So he implies we're going to be stuck with them. But we're not going to be stuck with them here in America. We're going to be stuck with them in Guantanamo instead, which is troubling in a number of ways, including one, A, having a concentration camp, having a concentration camp at all, and two, that it's out on an island that's a complete black box that we'll have no insight to, no oversight of. We don't know what's going on. Are we keeping them prisoner there? Are we starving them to death and cremating their remains so that nobody finds them like the Nazis did? I don't know. I do not know. You will not know. On the other hand, it's entirely possible that it will never happen because it has all the hallmarks of just something that he came up with, or that somebody said, I know, let's send him to Guantanamo. I'm going to announce. And very interesting that he chose to do it in, I guess, like he took the White House military staff. There are some, and had them all in their dress uniforms and standing in rows behind them, like lining the hallway in which he made this announcement, so that everybody saw that it was a strongly strong announcement because it was military, and military means strong. It was a weird announcement all by itself. Now, other aspects of immigration come up from the Bulwark articles. The first, I'm doing it in reverse chronological order here, Scott. The first one was from Mark Hertling under the title of Using Military Jets for Deportations is an Ugly, Wasteful Spectacle. True. Now, what are we talking about here? This is very interesting to us, but this is interesting to us because we are mad as technocrats that it is wasteful, and mad as pluralists that it unnecessarily agitates and alienates the countries to whom we're sending these folks back because we're antagonizing them with a military presence. But it doesn't answer the friend-enemy framework. and yet we'll share it. But this is it. Now we will acknowledge what we're doing. Amid the torrent of news accompanying the new administration, the short-lived standoff between President Trump and Colombian President Gustavo Petro came and went before most people could untangle what happened, and that's part of the fire hose strategy here. The crisis is now resolved, although it got resolved in that the newspaper said, crisis resolved, Trump won, and then we found out later, no, Trump didn't win. But everybody was, why are you talking about that? That's resolved already. Get with the times. We're on to another problem. Anyway, but one detail struck me, the writer here again, Mark Hertling, struck me as particularly revealing. Yes, but only as a technocrat. The standoff was sparked when two U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster III cargo planes, technocrat, blah, 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 two military jets. No, two U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster III cargo planes filled with deportees were turned away from Colombian airspace. The C-17 is awesome. While not as sleek as F-16 Fighting Falcon, stop it, technocrat, or as high-tech as the B-2 Spirit bomber, I know, you know military jargon, or as advanced as the fifth-generation F-22 Raptor, none of which have anything to do with this story. It sends a message of unrivaled American power like no other. Our soldiers practice jumping out of this aircraft, which by itself is cool. Oh boy. But as a cavalry officer who spent a career in and around tanks, the plane's ability to deliver tons of equipment and supplies, from the 70-ton M1 Abrams tank to disassembled Apache or Black Hawk helicopters, like the one in the crash, to huge multiple-launch rocket systems and Patriot air defense platforms to ammunition like artillery rockets or even cruise missiles, directly to forward areas of any battlefield, always impressed me and made me grateful for the Air Force, the world's best rapid delivery service. On several occasions, I watched this beast land, deliver emergency supplies, and then take off from dirt strips that Army engineers had just constructed hours before, or unload more than 100 multinational paratroopers out of two side doors in a European airborne operation, or dispense tons of humanitarian supplies on repeated trips to a disaster area. You get the idea? I mean, this really isn't what we're dealing with. But let's move on. Just a little bit here. The C in C-17 stands for cargo, but it does more than carry stuff. It sends a message of power and the American can-do military spirit. With 223 of these behemoths, the Air Force is capable of delivering huge amounts of stuff anywhere in the world on short notice and in adverse conditions. But it's an expensive aircraft to own and operate. A Boeing 737, the classic workhorse of domestic commercial flights, will have a sticker price of $90 million to $120 million, depending on the model. Before discounts or buying in bulk. Boeing also makes the C-17, and depending on the year of production and the state of continuous upgrades, it will cost in the range of $220 to $340 million. Big reason for the price difference? The C-17 sports advanced military avionics, the reconfigurable payload bay, reinforced airframes, various defensive countermeasure systems, short field, rough runway landing and takeoff capabilities, etc. Civilian airliners, though, built for fuel efficiency during cruise flight, often flying at high altitudes for long distances with a significantly lighter passenger load. 737 uses about 6,000 pounds of fuel per hour and for two jet engines. The C-17 designed to conduct Well, you get the idea. Fuel inefficient. Operations costs inefficient. Yes. All true and worth noting. But I will note again, in at least in passing, technocratic objections to friend-enemy policy. Didn't mean to do that in dissecting the piece. Still a very interesting one, and still something we're very interested in. We love the logistics on this program. But now, of course, having gone through only part of that, we're left without time for discussing what I'll have to give you the title of the other Bulwark piece that Scott sent to me. This one by Adrian Carrasquillo, perhaps. Trump turns schools into an immigration battleground. And that is true, and we understand it as well. Kids are now being pulled from school. There is fear of agents coming, and quiet prep is taking place to avoid drawing the gaze of the Trump administration, which, again, we don't have time to read through at this point. But, by the way, just another job piled on top of America's school teachers. who have just gotten used to the idea that they're supposed to engage in tactical combat with school shooters, in addition to teaching the kids to hide and run and fight. And now teachers in some states supposed to, or at least allowed to, bring their own weapons to school so they can fight running gun battles like John Wick in the middle of a bunch of school kids. But now they have to also protect their kids from immigration roundups. And now we didn't even get to something else from the other day, but it is time for us to make our exit for the day. Now I have the feeling that there's more show coming for tomorrow. But we didn't even get to the story of the school that was approached by what they thought were ICE agents, and they said, no, sorry, we're not going to let you into the building to round up kids. We're protecting them here, and you have no warrant for anybody's arrest or anything. And then it turns out that it was allegedly, after turning away ICE and then having ICE deny that it was them and then saying, oh my God, we don't even know what agency of this chaos government was here, turned out allegedly to be the Secret Service. And you know what? That didn't make things a great deal better, because they were there apparently to make a visit to a 11-year-old kid who posted an anti-Trump video on social media. I mean, I don't know what was in this video that would concern the Secret Service so greatly, but I guess once you find out it's an 11-year-old, maybe you say, I don't know, maybe we investigate this thing at home instead of at school. But another crazy development that is responded to by the friend-enemy crowd as, let's make a show of force at an American school, much less in Colombia by flying C-17s in there. All right, see, that's Scott. I connected these two articles after all. What do you know? All right, we're wrapping it up. We're out of here live. Justice Putnam is next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what we missed for today. Trump's new press secretary royally screwed up when one of her lies was used in a court case to freeze Trump's illegal funding freeze. We haven't even kept you up to date on what happened with that. Maybe something for me to discuss on tape for you to hear tomorrow. But at any rate, you want a real new program? Justice will have one for you next.